what's new for SOLIDWORKS Electrical 2017. My name's Tom DeLaura. We're doing this as a go-to webinar, so if you guys have any questions, please feel free to use the question panel. I'll try to attack them while we're talking. Otherwise, I might just send you an email after the fact. Let's dive into our what's new. And I've broken out today's agenda just based on some of the topics or the categories of the items that I found most interesting or that are most beneficial to use inside of SOLIDWORKS 2017, SOLIDWORKS Electrical 2017. I first want to talk about the idea of an ecosystem. So SOLIDWORKS has been developing a strategy so a designer can start from cradle to grave or start to finish of a project lifecycle. And what this is now including for new technology and new development is the Internet of Things devices. So how devices are integrated to one another, both mechanically, electrically, and now on this board design level, so our computer design level of how these parts are talking to one another. So we're starting to design for this Internet of Things, and we're looking deeper into how SOLIDWORKS can be integrated to these parts. So this is where the SOLIDWORKS ecosystem comes in, especially the SOLIDWORKS electrical ecosystem. We're talking with SOLIDWORKS as our core, our 3D modeling, and breaking it into SOLIDWORKS PCB and SOLIDWORKS electrical. And these two can link together from the SOLIDWORKS interface. So a board made in PCB can be imported to SOLIDWORKS. A schematic made in SOLIDWORKS electrical can be used to route our wires to and from components, including that PCB. So everything's being integrated in this ecosystem. So our ecosystem is now collaborating between these electrical products inside of our SOLIDWORKS space. What that looks like from a higher level is we'll have a PCB schematic. We'll break that into a PCB layout. So now we're putting those board components into a design. The board's going to be customized to fit inside of our electrical assembly. We can then use a visualization tool to see that board in 3D, import it into our SOLIDWORKS space. So now we're working with SOLIDWORKS with the PCB. We can integrate that into SOLIDWORKS electrical with my messy panel box there. But we can actually start to bring those boards in and associate them to our electrical schematic to route wires and cables to and from, and tie that into our electrical schematic, and that's where those wires and cables are actually being routed from. Finally, we have all the capabilities of SOLIDWORKS, so we can use our flow simulation if we want to run some simulation on heat inside of a panel box or running over a board. We can use SOLIDWORKS Visualize to get that end product design of our wires, our cables, and you can use SOLIDWORKS Composer as a technical documentation to show the person on the assembly line how this gets wired together. All right, so that's kind of the big picture of the SOLIDWORKS ecosystem. What we're here today to talk about is the SOLIDWORKS electrical aspect of it and how that has changed for 2017. We're going to first talk about some administration things that have changed inside. So the first one, and the way I have this set up today, I'm just going to kind of introduce what's new. I'll jump into the software and show you where to find these features and how they work inside of SOLIDWORKS Electrical. So the first one is associating data file as shortcuts. So in 2016 and previous, we've always been able to bring a data file in as reference, so maybe a specification sheet, where it would create a copy and then bring it in, and that's where it would live as a static document. So what we're doing in 2017 now, and I just have this project open, I have a folder dedicated to specification sheets. If I right-click and say New, I have my normal view of I can add a cover page, I can add a schematic or a single line diagram or a mixed scheme here. I could always add that data file as a copy, as a DWG. But now with our data file shortcut, what it's actually doing is allowing you to go out into maybe a server location, maybe a desktop location, and find documentation that you want to be linking into this project. So now if somebody comes in and updates my technical information on the spec sheet, I don't have to re-import it into SOLIDWORKS Electrical. It's always going to be that link. And you can kind of see that arrow that's pointing to the link to go out and find that information. So it's going to launch the PDF versus launching a page inside of SOLIDWORKS Electrical. All right, so that's our data file association. Next thing, as far as administrative goes, the ability to update project reports when we go into a print or an archive situation. So in previous versions, you could archive at any time, but if something was out of date or something had been modified before, it wouldn't really let you know. It would let you archive at that current state. So we might have had a wire number that wasn't updated. We might have had a component that didn't have a mark on it and needed to be pushed through the update data. So now inside of my design here, if I wanted to go into my, actually I'll show you where the setting is first. Under Project Configurations, at the very bottom of our General tab, we have Update Generated Drawings. We get some actions that we can never warn us about this. So that's what always happened in 16 and previous. We can prompt it to ask us, do we want to update generated drawings, or do we always want it to happen in the background? So without any user interference or user acceptance, it will just go ahead and run those updates. So I have it set to ask me, and what this does, if I go ahead and export out my drawings as PDFs, what it's going to prompt me when I say print is your project has been modified since the last generation. What do you want to do? So I can still continue without updating. So maybe I've edited something that I don't want to change. I manually updated a wire number or a mark. And I said, yeah, I'm good with it. I can update without. Otherwise, it's going to update my reports, my design rules, and my terminal strip drawings prior to printing out or prior to archiving. All right. And again, that just lives in our project configuration, update generated drawings. All right. Our updates on reports, we do have a couple here. The first one I want to talk about is creating links in our design rule checks, as well as our reports. So actually giving us an interface to select references and marks and components that are being used inside of our schematics. Let's show you an example of where this can live. It lives in our actual report. So not in a report that we generated and create into a project document, but the reports as a inside of the report manager. You can see here I have my bill of materials. I'll just expand this. So I have my list of bill of materials, and I have some hot links here that I can select. So if I want to select what my PCB is and get more details on this, just simply clicking it will pop up my manufacturer part properties for this PCB that I created. All right, so I can start to see the number of circuits and terminals on it, any associated board files or 3D parts that are associated with it, as well as my circuit and terminal information. So instead of just having text there and then navigating outside of my reports, finding my component, finding where that PCB lives, going into that component from the PCB, I don't even know where I put it, so even better. Trying to find where that component lives and then find the properties becomes a hassle where if I just know that my report's current and up to date, all I have to do is go ahead and find that and select it. All right. How we can make changes to this or how we create that association comes from generating that report. So under project configurations, where we actually create and edit our report, I can go ahead and find my bill of material report and look at the properties. And we'll have a new column or a new selection inside of our column tab where I can start to select a go-to. And our go-to is going to be that hyperlink inside of our reports. So for this one, I have a BOM ID. It's going to be linked to my manufactured part. And we can see some of our other selections as we can link to a cable, a circuit, a component, can actually link to a drawing that will prompt us into the drawing that exists in. Our functions and locations, as well as our manufacturer parts and symbols, and wire as well. So some different fields that we can link to, and then characteristics that meet the type of reference that we're pulling out. So for a reference link, we'll be able to link to a component or a bill of material or that type of reference there. I'm going to leave up my report configuration because what's new is the ability to add function and location descriptions without expert mode. And this one's actually a customer request to be able to have that feedback without going into expert mode, which if you've ever gone into expert mode, it requires a little bit of SQL experience to be able to code and not break a database. So having that ability to come in and actually grab a description. So now I'm looking for my location description. And we can see right here that it's already in our variable and simple formula. So it's already a call out that has that link to our to the description of our location, which is a text field. So this becomes a location of translatable text, and the field is 0. So just by double-clicking that, I get my location description. All right, and that's the same for the function description. All right. For our functionality, so now some of the big hitters that were added into 2017. First one I'd like to talk about is the ability to associate external SOLIDWORKS assemblies. So we talked about linking external files into SOLIDWORKS Electrical. Now we have the ability to not just create a new SOLIDWORKS assembly, which we could do before, but actually link that to an assembly that may be a work in progress that the mechanical team's still working on, or it might just be something that's completed and lives outside of the electrical space. Now we can bring it in without having to do a file insert. So let me close out of my reports here, and we'll go back into my document tree, shrink some of this stuff up. So what I'm looking to do is create a new link to an existing SOLIDWORKS assembly. And that still lives under our process tab. But you'll notice that this no longer says SOLIDWORKS cabinet drawing or SOLIDWORKS cabinet, which always kind of annoyed me because the program can live outside of just panel box design. So now the fact that we're working with SOLIDWORKS assemblies makes more sense to what the tool can be used for. So if I select my SOLIDWORKS assembly, we have the creation of assembly files. So we still can create from scratch here and just generate a blank assembly. I'll do a blank assembly for my top level, but for my computer system that I'm designing, which is one of my locations, I'm going to come out and say select an existing file, and it's going to filter out just SOLIDWORKS assembly files. So I can select my computer box and say open, and now it's giving me a link to that assembly. So if I hit OK, you'll notice that my high-level template project is being generated internal to SOLIDWORKS Electrical, where my computer system has that arrow, which means it's being linked to another computer system. All right. Another thing that I left out of my PowerPoint but discovered is if I wanted to launch SOLIDWORKS or SOLIDWORKS Electrical 3D from my electrical interface, it used to be a double click, and it would launch SOLIDWORKS regardless if your electrical 3D add-in was loaded. So now what we get is a prompt saying your electrical 3D add-in is not turned on in SOLIDWORKS, so I can't open this file yet, which I actually find beneficial because I used to be able to launch SOLIDWORKS. You could start manipulating something, and you'd realize that your electrical tab wasn't turned on, and you'd end up closing down SOLIDWORKS, adding your add-in like I'm doing now, so selecting our electrical add-in, and then relaunching your assembly from either from your project manager or from SOLIDWORKS Electrical again. So this time around, I'll do it from SOLIDWORKS Electrical. I'll go ahead and create that link or use that link to the computer system that lives out on my desktop. And I can quickly bring in that SOLIDWORKS assembly. All right. We do have some associations already done in here. What's also nice is that it's going to use my assembly name instead of the associated name that usually comes with a default SOLIDWORKS or SOLIDWORKS Electrical assembly. All right. For those of you that are new to SOLIDWORKS Electrical, just an idea of some of the links that occur. Your components end up with connection points, so a C point that's linked to your terminal or your circuit and terminal information of your schematic, and we can generate wires, and these are just sketched wires that will follow a path inside of your assembly. So the orange line here is my path. The white, black, yellow lines are the actual wires with length and property information that get plugged into the system. All right. Super parts, another customer request here, gives us the ability to create multiple manufacturer parts under one line item. So I use the example of a connector the most. A connector is so much more than just one piece part. It's going to be the connector itself. It'll have a back shell. It might have a strain relief. It might have terminals that are or ferrules that are plugging into that connector. You're going to have a whole bunch of parts that get associated into just one thing that we call a connector. So what a super part gives us is that ability, if I go into my library and manufacture parts, well, the ability to create a single searchable item that's going to bring in a whole bunch of manufacturer parts. So I'm in my manufacturer parts manager. I'm looking for connectors, and instead of just clicking add manufacturer part, I now have a drop down to say add a super part, which will give me properties. So I can call this Tom's connector. My manufacturer, I'll link into CADimensions. All right, so that's going to give me a class of connectors. And over on my next tab, where we're used to seeing circuit and terminal information, what the super part's looking for are existing manufacturer parts that I want to add. So I can look for base connectors, and I'll grab this 4-pin connector. And then I want some accessory and auxiliary parts that are going to also link into my connector. So if I search for auxiliary, I can see I have some terminal sockets that for a 4-pin connector I want to add 4 of. And I might also want, let's just grab a D-sub back shell for it as well. This one probably doesn't match at all, but that's okay. So what I'm doing is building up almost a sub-assembly of parts, and I can go ahead and select it. And now that's going to be searchable inside of my database. So if I'm looking at connectors, I want my reference type to be a super part. Now if I hit search, you'll see that these are my options for a super part. And Tom's connector is there, and that's going to be associated with these components all grouped together. All right? So I'm pretty excited about that one because it saves us from creating a symbol, placing all these base components and auxiliary and accessory components to it, and then creating a macro of that symbol just so we can store all this information. The super part's actually going to be storing the information for us now. All right. Another one that is a customer request and is pretty neat is the ability to use I/O information as our wire marks or as our echo potential call out. I'll just jump right in and show you this one. Down below here I have a PLC that's being linked up into a terminal block. If I wanted to draw wires, so I want to draw 8 wires out of my PLC into my terminal block, I can quickly draw those wires and make a connection. So you'll see that everything gets trimmed. I'm connected to my PLC and to my terminal block. And what I would typically do is say, these are new wires. Go ahead and number all my new wires based on a strategy. So my strategy here is the next available number that's not being used. So I'll get 56 through 63. This doesn't give me too much information regarding what this wire is truly doing or what it's linked up to. So what's been added is the ability to propagate information from components. So if I select my wires and my PLC here, I can say, right from my process tab, propagate data to the connected objects. And I'm going to select that it's just the objects that I have selected in my current schematic. And I want to say, I want to copy my information from my PLC channel. So I'm looking for the PLC data that's going to be copied. And the information of that PLC channel is going to be my terminal. Sorry, that went over to the other screen. So it's going to be my terminal, but I also have options of the mark, maybe the manufacturer data I want to link in there, or the mnemonic that's describing what that channel does for me. And then I can push that into either my equipotential or my wire, and then the mark data or any user data fields there. So we can start to push data into fields related to one another. It's already set, that's why. All right. So this is the principle there, the properties that I want to push. I'm going to push it into my wire mark as well, and I'll go ahead and hit OK. And you'll notice that my equipotential marks here and my wire marks are now going to replicate what my terminal information is on the PLC. All right, so that one's really cool, very beneficial as we use more and more PLCs or more terminal information that needs to get pushed into our wires. All right, so I'll wrap up. I was trying to keep this to a half hour, so I'll wrap up with our interface. A couple new changes here. The first one, another customer request, is the ability to have an anchor point when we copy and paste. So if I were to take, let's say, this fan symbol, and if I just did a Control-C and a Control-V, you'll notice that I do have a point that it's going to follow, but it doesn't really help me place this onto a wire. However, now if I right-click and say copy with insertion point, or Control-Shift-C, it's going to prompt me in my command manager to say, pick a point that you want to be your insertion point. I'll go ahead and select my connection point. And now if I do a Control-V or a paste, my insertion point's no longer on that bottom corner. It's actually on the connection point. I can drop that fan on a line and create new connections. All right, so that's copy-paste with an insertion point. We can also start to change our the way that we create a symbol. So SOLIDWORKS Electrical uses somewhat of its own language regarding attributes. If I were to open up my fan symbol here, you'll notice that everything has this pound sign and then location tag or function tag, which I know as location mark and function mark now, or tag being the mark itself. But for a new user or even a veteran user, these become confusing to what they're being related to. So for 2017, under our edit symbol, we now have the drop-down to display how we want to see these. So do I want to see a sample value to understand that my location is usually listed as an L1-L2 or function 1, or any voltage that may be described as a component mark? Or do we want to actually show an attribute description, which I prefer now, to say this is my location mark, my function mark, my component mark, without needing to know what the pound value attribute name was. We can also go ahead and say hide all our attributes and have just a clean symbol. All right. But I've been preferring to have the description of the attributes. All right. Also have a new global setting to show connection points based on what the user would like to see. So I'll get out of my symbol here. Go ahead and save those changes. So you'll notice on my ground terminal here, I'm only displaying connection points for items that have wires going into them. So this has become a global setting underneath our project configuration and the graphic tab to say our symbols always had connection points, and we could pick what color we wanted, we could pick what size we wanted, but what we were only allowed to do is inside the symbol we could say show these or don't show these. So now I can say at the top level, I never want to show my connection points, and that will go ahead and hide them across the board. So maybe for when we go ahead and print these, we'd like to use them for placing components, but we don't want to show them when we go ahead and release documents. Or I can say always show, and that's going to show every connection point on the symbols. My new preference is to only show when connected. So give me that verification that a wire is linked into a component and show me the connection point. All right, and our final one is our graphical properties, which I know gets used quite a bit as we're editing text or editing symbols. As I look here, our properties panel got added, and these are movable and they can be linked to any real place. So I like to keep my property panel over on the right-hand side and linked in. And the property panel changes based on what we have selected. So if I don't have anything selected, it's going to give me my drawing properties. If I select the wire, it's going to give me my equipotential, my wire, or my wire style properties. What's new for 2017 is this added tab, which is going to give us our graphical properties, which used to live under our modify and properties. It would be a pop-up that would come and give you the ability to edit. So now it's going to be embedded into our property panel. So if I were to maybe draw some new text and say, it's called Tom, it's left justified, and we go ahead and say OK and place it. What I would have to do before is select it, go into my modify, find properties. But with my graphical properties embedded, I can come in, quickly change my text. I can quickly change my height of that text. Even if I wanted to do some color, I can go ahead and change the layer that it's being applied to, or say I want this to be red. And all those updates are happening in my interface without needing a second pop-up or a second screen being displayed. All right. So those are my highlights. You can always email me or call me or submit a technical support case if you have any questions that you'd like to talk about any further.
Don't forget to check us out on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and our blog for more great content by clicking on the links in the description below.